How are you guys doing? I'm good as well, thank you. So today what we'll do is this is our last lecture. Thank you, Kazim. I'm doing all right. Uh, a little bit a little bit concerned, so I'll share what my concern is for you guys. Hello, Jeffrey. So what basically today what we're going to go through is let me just sort of list it for you. We are at the end of the semester, right? Well, not really the end, but approaching it. So this is VS242, and it is week 11. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at risk assessments. And there is a portion of this week that you'll be doing on your own, the ecological risk assessments. I'm not going to spend time on that in class. We'll look at environmental policy, and then we'll look at presenting. Presenting. Basically, you'll be presenting as a group in Zoom. So you'll have to be prepared to go ahead and do that. And we'll talk about that today. And when do your presentations take place? In weeks 12 and 13. And then in week 14, you have your final test. Week 14. Okay, so that's sort of where we're at today. I mean, there's no lectures in these weeks, but there will be your presentations. Okay, and so it's a good idea to attend those presentations because I may include some questions in the final test. And it's just a good idea to attend those presentations because you do learn about different environmental issues and situations that have taken place. Any questions at this time? Okay, I don't see any questions. So let's go ahead. Okay, what would happen if some are group on the day that they present? So your class, if you look at your schedules, your class time is 1:30 to 2:20, is it not? Don't you, isn't this time on your schedule? So then there should not be any overlap. Like if you are presenting, I mean, for the recordings, I was going over time, but for your presentations, there will be no overlap. There should not be any overlap. Why? Because this time should be on your schedule. Does that make sense? Okay, so like the classes are only going to be 45 minutes. The other time you're going to use to prepare your presentation or prepare for the final. Okay. The lecture content is going to be over as of today. Any other questions? That's a great question. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, you should be fine. 3:30. You should be out of here before then, well before then. Well, your class should be done by 2:20. Okay, so let's go through some of the basics of risk assessments under the Environmental Protection Act. And I'm going to focus mostly on the portion that is that is that we generally use in brownfield sites especially. So I've posted this for you guys. If you haven't seen it till now, it might be because I had posted it today. So you got your glossary of what each term means. And essentially, this guideline tells you how this can be done. This might the additional reading that I've posted for you guys is related to the ecological components or the ecological risk assessment. Whereas here we're mostly focused on the physical portion. You've got you usually what happens in in performing a risks assessment that is conducted in a way to satisfy the ministry is you would have a preliminary framework that's set up. Then what you do is you will have a phase 1 and a phase 2 ESA that's conducted. And then based on that, the risk assessor will complete a pre-submission form and submit that to the ministry, and they will come together and come up with specific standards for that site. There will be some public communication as well that is required. Now, usually for a site assessment, you have to be a QP ESA or a professional engineer or professional geoscientist. But you need slightly different training and education to be a QP risk assessor or RA, QP RA. But once you file that, you can then get a record of site condition based on that. Okay. Here are all the different. So let's see, here we go. So when you initiate the risk assessment, it's basically you're trying to look at what is the probability of harming people, right? You're basically asking yourself, what is the likelihood that this contamination can reach people? Right, let me just stop the share here and try to explain what I mean by that. Let's say this happened in an I think it was in an American city. You know, you had in a subway, you had a leak years ago. You've got the surface, or you've got buildings, and then you've got the subway tunnel. Well, they stored fuel in the in above ground storage tanks that leaked. So that leak went deep into the bedrock. So you've got this fuel spill that is sitting in the bedrock. So let's say is all bedrock. Let's say this depth is 40 meters. So the closest people are to this, even in the basements down here. Let's say you've got basement apartments. The closest people are to this is about 37 meters. How likely do you think this is going to impact them? Well, what you do is you create a conceptual site model. You create a conceptual site model. And then you go from there. We talked about it a little bit in the RSC portion, but in the CSM or the conceptual site model, we look at 3 aspects. We look at the source. So what would the source be in this case? The spilled fuel. That's number 1. Number 2, we look at the pathway. Is there a way for that spilled fuel to get to those people? Well, it could be through vapors, or it could be through pumping a well, like if there's a well down there, or it could be through construction if you're excavating. Otherwise, do you think that that's going to impact humans? So that's what we're really concerned with. Receptors. Where the receptors are life forms like humans, pets. During the risk assessment, if we are able to somehow block the pathway of that contamination ever getting, we can block that pathway of that contamination ever getting to the surface. You might be able to convince the ministry that that's not an issue, or we can show that the concentrations that exist on site are not going to impact humans if they use certain engineering controls or institutional controls, like risk management. Why? Because imagine trying to clean up that in a city that has that spill. Do you want to spend 30, 40, $50 million to clean up a spill that's not going to impact humans or most life forms? Or you just leave it in place so they're not going to be impacted by it. Let's go back. So what do you want to consider? The likelihood that adverse effects could impact human and ecological receptors. The contaminants of concerns. And if and the ministry might agree after reviewing all the paperwork, and then you go back and forth. And usually what you have is you have leading the risk assessment portion is somebody who has expertise in toxicology, ecology. There might be an ecologist on the team. There's usually a geologist. They also want to have an engineer who knows how how to have certain items in place that will protect the humans. Right, you've got your QPRA. You might have their staff, and they have to make certified statements, right? So what are the minimum requirements? Measures can be implemented. So like I said, you want to have the people with these different types of expertise on your squad, on your risk assessment is called the pre-submission form, and it's submitted to let the ministry review what the issues are and what steps could be required to protect anybody who is residing on that property or who's going to stay on that property. And yeah, and this document goes into a lot of detail about all the different items that must be there. Like for example, you want to have a site plan, you want to have the sources of contaminants, you want to have cross sections showing what the pathways are for the contamination. So the drawings have to be in a lot of details. The drawings have to include where the receptors are for the site. Like for example, what are the hydrogeologic conditions? All the contaminant plumes or contaminant sources. Have you sampled the media? Right? So how do you conduct all of this? Well, what you want to do is you want to basically go out and characterize the site. So you study its background, study the background of the site and neighboring properties. Then what you do is you assess what contaminants could be at the site based on the history. Then what you look at is what you're going to sample. So you, at a minimum, will probably sample soil, groundwater, soil vapors, maybe indoor air. On some sites, you might sample sediment, surface water. That's why you design your sampling program. Design a sampling and analysis program. Because you want to cover off. And when you're performing this, you look at the soil types, right? You log boreholes. You take vapor readings and notes. You determine soil grain size, texture. You look at aquifer properties. Let's say that's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Continue. You want to create a profile, a geological profile. You want to determine groundwater flow, hydraulic conductivity, and so on. And then you want to look at proposed structures. Based on the land use, the occupancy. For example, it'll be different for an industrial building versus, let's say, a school or a house, residential home. And then the ministry reviews it, and you go back and forth, and then you have to put in risk or environmental management system or a risk management and monitoring plan in place. And you might have site-specific standards developed based on all of this. Like, for example, if you've got contamination, what if you're not going to build with subsurface? So I'm going to round off conversation on risk assessment by talking about a project I was involved in. So you had this site for years, it sat vacant. So the proponent wanted to build the site, and the reason why they were unable to is there was a plume at a depth of about 6 meters. So there's a contaminant plume floating underneath the site. And it's flowing in this direction. Say this is north, this is south. The site boundaries. What the proponent wants to do is build a building with no basement. And an impermeable slab. No basement and an impermeable slab. When they proposed a basement, the ministry said no. Why? Because when they sampled, they found vapors could be a concern. But based on their calculations and based on the impermeable structure, they do not believe that indoor air quality will not be affected. Indoor air quality will not be affected. That was their stance. So essentially, you've got a source, you've got a pathway of the source, a path to the receptors, humans. If you can block that path, your risk assessment should be improved. Hopefully it's improved now. Okay, so I have posted some material for you guys to review on your own, the ecological, uh, as well as the federal contaminated site risk assessors. So that is something for your study. It's just basically a guidance document. So in that case, you also have the added component of having perhaps a species at risk also assessed. So moving on to our last topic. For our lectures for the course. So environment policy, it's a collection. So legislation, we know it's a collection of laws and regulations pertaining to water quality, soil, basically protection of the environment. And it can vary depending on which country you're in or where you are, even within Canada. But its main goal is to secure a sustainable future for those living on Earth. So environmental legislation is adopted by governments to rationalize a course of action. It's basically implementing an environmental policy, which may be to prevent or eliminate damage to the environment that would affect the biosphere. It's encouraged to have more harmony between us and nature, and also understand ecosystems. So policy instruments are tools that can be used by regulators, legislature, governments, and achieve objectives. That's known as a policy instrument. And it's to address larger societal issues. Sometimes it's in penalties and fine, just like parking tickets. get a parking ticket. It's to encourage people not to park in the wrong spot. Sometimes it's encouraged through trade agreements, so on. So the way it's linked to environmental laws is that these policies are enacted through these laws, the environmental laws, taxes, and fees. So it's important that we understand what compels us to have this legislation in place. So if you look at this slide here, it's a broad categorization of Salzman's environmental policy instruments. So it's educational and technical assistance to the market, government mandated labeling on goods, government mandated packaging, incentive policies like financial assistance or financial assurance, taxation or lack of taxes, or environmental taxes, like when you buy a computer or an electronic instrument, there's a disposal fee, or when you get new tires installed. And then you have environmental compliance programs like the tire recycling program or the 3R waste programs. And you've got this table that outlines how different policy instruments are enacted or applied. For example, carbon tax or wildlife refuge, species at risk. Environmental related taxes are basically meant to discourage consumption, like the carbon tax. Do I think that it will eliminate our use? It will perhaps have people thinking in terms of getting electric vehicles, but will it globally change things on a global scale? Until countries like India, China, the US get on board, consequence. However, the government does believe that we do have to do our part. That's why they do tax greenhouse gas emissions and so forth for how you're dealing with stormwater. Now, one way that they do reward people reducing or being more sustainable is just simply by having a lower heating bill. Or if somebody installs solar panels, giving them rebates. Another way that the government applies its policies is you have to have discharge permits or environmental compliance approvals. You have to have the rights to emit a certain amount of pollution or to pump treated water to the environment. Like I said earlier, there might be a surcharge on the price of polluting products, or if you do reduce your motor vehicles or scrap tires. And another way that environmental policy is implemented encourages through subsidies, like tax exemptions on electric cars. Go out and get that Tesla. So here's a summary of how key developments take place. There might be a shift in policy to greater accountability. There might be an issue of jurisdictional powers as well. Like, for example, the speed cameras between the provincial and the municipal government. There might be the debates on the effects of wildlife or ecology, or whether or not greenhouse gas emissions are a good idea, reduction, tree rights and land disputes. Anyhow, that ends that topic. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to get into your presentation. So you will be presenting next week, so make sure you're on time. Remember, we do have in the engagement portion, so if you don't, because this is this is a synchronous class set out in your schedule, so make sure that you attend. And what is the schedule looking like? Well, let's see. What do I have as your schedule? So on the 24th, I have Aiden, Nathan, Alina, and Stephen presenting first. Then I have Gabby and Kaz presenting second. And then I have Alex, you, Peter, and Ryan presenting. And then on Monday, December the 1st, I've got Jeffrey, Jamie, Jabari, Quinton. And then I've got Joshim, Gopika, Akshita, Ilya, and Kitaro presenting. Any questions about that? So how you're going to present, how you're going to set up is I'll try to give you co-hosting once it's your turn. And
comes to presenting.
And here are some good tips on how to present. Okay, so all four of you will be present. Here are some good tips on how to present a good Zoom presentation.
When it comes to presenting online, most of what we see is pretty shit. In fact, if you're invited to watch an online presentation or attend an online virtual meeting, your expectations are pretty low. Well, these are 5 top tips to make sure you deliver awesome content that everybody will remember. Now, it's worth saying, I'm assuming in this video that you're going to be either filming on your phone or on your laptop, as most people would be. Tip number 1, think about the setting that you are in. So when you're delivering an online presentation, really think about your background, what's behind you. You don't want anything that's too distracting. So not in the kitchen with all the kitchen crap behind you. You want something that's plain and that looks professional. Just use a backdrop like I'm using now. This is just a standard black backdrop. And you can buy these on Amazon and they're really not that expensive. The same, you can get a stand to hold your backdrop on as well. So I'd really consider investing in one of those if you're going to be doing more online presentations. Think about how quiet the area is that you're presenting in. So you don't want any background noise. Close the windows, make it as quiet as possible, because when you're presenting online, the sound is really important. And think about the lighting as well. So you want the space that you're in to be really well lit. So turn the lights on. If there's a window in the room that you're in, make sure that that is in front of you. And basically that no lighting source is directly behind you, because what you'll find is it'll look like you're in darkness to the viewers. So really think about the setting that you're in. Number 2, stand up. If you stand up, you will naturally deliver a much better presentation. You will look like you are performing. Far too often when we sit and we watch an online presentation, we're watching somebody sat at the table, slunched down. It's hard to present from this point of view. It looks like they don't care. It's hard to retain somebody's attention when you look like that. So stand up and really give it a presentation style. It will shock the audience into listening because most of what they see in online presentations is crap, and it will make them listen. So deliver a performance by standing up. Now, if you're going to stand up, you need to raise your laptop up higher so that...
So that part, I don't expect you guys to deliver on. I do understand that you might not be set up for that, but do consider that for the future.
the lens of the camera is in your direct eye line. You do not want to be looking down at your camera lens because then all your audience can see is the inside of your nose cavity. So standing up will just naturally make you deliver a better presentation, and that is key when delivering a presentation online. You are still performing, so stand up and perform. Tip number 3, rehearse. You need to treat your online...
This is one that a lot of people really don't pay attention to. But if you get together with your group and rehearse a few times, you're going to be in really good shape.
Presentation as you would a presentation on a stage in front of 200 people. So practice, get set up, get the camera set up, and practice performing to that camera lens. Tip number 4. Dress to impress. How often do we watch people presenting online and it looks like they've made no effort at all? You need to treat your online presentation in the same way you would a performance in front of 200 people. So dress to impress. If it's casual, something where you're maybe just talking to colleagues, something casual like this would work. But maybe if you're presenting to customers, you need to dress smarter, something like this. The important thing to remember with online presentations is you need to treat it as you would a presentation in front of a live audience. So when it comes to what to wear, my advice is mirror the audience. If you're presenting to colleagues, then you can go with casual, but if you're presenting to customers, I'd always go with smart. Think about what you would be wearing if you were on stage. And number 5, think about your supporting material. By supporting material, I mean PowerPoint, Prezi, whatever slide format you intend to use, but also video as well. Don't ignore video. You can still start an online presentation with an opening video if you want to. And the slides that you use, make sure you use pictures so that people really...
Okay, all right, so that covers that. There's another thing that I wanted to share with you guys as well, and that relates to how to brief a case, because you are, in essence, briefing a case.
Brief is referring to an appellate brief.
So let's see how this guy talks about briefing a case. It's not necessarily an environmental case, but it is a case that he's going to refer to.
How to brief a case. I guess the first question is, what is a case brief? We actually use the word brief a couple different ways in law. One way is the case brief, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. The other instance of using the word brief is referring to an appellate brief that attorneys will prepare for a case on appeal, a very lengthy document, or it might be a brief of authority that the attorneys would prepare in support of a motion that they're going to argue in front of the court. But here we're talking about the case brief. It's a brief that is prepared typically by law students, paralegal students, other people studying the law. And I suppose it might have some application in the law office where tell someone, one of the staff, go brief this case for me. So in that context, we're talking about a case brief. So what is a case brief? It's a summary of the most important points in a court decision, a particular court decision. Usually that's going to be an appellate court decision. And we call it a brief because it's brief, typically a page or less. Now, why do we brief cases? Why will we brief a case? Well, to understand how the principle of law that case is all about, how it's being applied to a particular set of facts. Try to understand what the case stands for. In law school, we use this as a teaching method, and it does have a very practical application to understand what that case is all about. The first part of a brief, a case brief, is going to be setting out the facts, the important facts. You have to distinguish what facts really
Give you a bit
have
of a
some sort of
background. You can watch
application.
the rest of it. I've posted it for you guys. Let's see. And let's just revisit in week 10 what your actual project is or what it was as we end today's class. As we come to the end of today's session, you're going to need this time to, one, go over the ecological version of risk assessments, not too much detail. Number two, to prepare your slides and report for the case study. Okay, so 10-minute presentation for your group, right? You're targeting that amount of time. So your presentation marks are set up like this. So it's your presentation, your confidence, your presence, information, how it's presented, your knowledge. There's a question answer session. And then there's 10% for your written portion. So make sure you follow the outline given. Okay. And as I said earlier, I'm expecting all of you to attend and be a part of this. All right. So let's just end today's class with a reminder of what you need to do the next few weeks. So the rest of week 10 or 11, go through the eco risk assessments documents. I'll help you with the test. Prepare your presentations. Well, lastly, what I didn't mention to now is you have your online assignment number 9 that you have to finish. Work on your online assignment number 9. And what is that? You essentially have to discuss the differences between a risk assessment or risk assessment under OREG versus an ecological risk assessment, the 3 differences. That's online assignment number 9, which is due on November the 23rd. So far, you guys have been pretty good about these. So these are the items to complete for week 11. And I've given you guys the groups and the dates that I'm expecting your presentations. So go ahead and use the rest of this week to finish those tasks, okay? So like I said, you might want to review the eco risk assessment and then use that in your assignment number 9. Don't spend more than half an hour on these, okay? Prepare your presentations. And that is the end of the course content, but I think there's a couple of things remaining. I think there's going to be a short online assessment number 10. It should be just a reflective. There'll be a global citizenship assignment, which again will help you ready to mark. And you'll be submitting your case study reports after your presentations. And then you have your final test. Okay, that's why the content is done, but you still have a lot of work to do to round off the course. Okay, guys. So with that, I'm going to leave this class open for a few more minutes if you have any questions. Otherwise, you guys are good to go. And I'll see you next week, 1:30